Absolutely.
All right, so take it away.
Excellent. So this is programming Lisp, right? No, it's cybersecurity, right? Okay, I'm just seeing if you all are awake. Thanks for letting me chat with you. I thought what I would do to make this a little bit more interactive, because I find that by myself I'm rarely very interesting. So I need you all to help me be interesting. Cool? All right. So I thought that I would just, to introduce myself, would go through a little bit of my background that's normally not in my bio online, that kind of thing, to sort of give you a sense of how I arrived to the security world. And then I thought I'd go over what I can about the city of Asheville's cybersecurity stance and what we do. And I'm not really going to go too much into that because, as we know, intel is everything. We don't like to give away intel, right? And then I thought I would talk about, stupid things I've done, which, everyone finds that interesting, right? And then kind of close it off with getting your questions. And again, I'm not going to talk about specifics, what kind of firewall we use and that kind of thing. But I am more than happy to talk about general approach. I'm more than happy to share stories from my consulting career where I'm not talking about a live, target, right? And inviting participation, which we never want to do that, right? So let me get started. Life post 50 is really interesting because you get different glasses and, you see differently and all that. I thought I would tell you a little bit about my background. Like a lot of folks my age, I had an unhealthy interest with electronics and microcomputers back in the day. And so a lot of folks, like a lot of folks my age in the 80s, I was an unrepentant nerd, right? And so what did that mean? It meant that I was doing things like reading the schematic of the Apple II microcomputer and learning how to program using opcodes in machine language, not assembly language. That came a little later. And it meant me and my buddies were tearing stuff apart, getting acquainted with Hayes modems that, if you've ever seen the movie War Games, acoustic couplers and that kind of stuff. So yes, I'm old as dirt. Out of all of that sort of came this belief, this unshakable belief that I think is still true today, which is that anything can be hacked, anything can be broken. If one person can design it, another person can circumvent it. This is very, very important because you have folks out there talking about things like blockchain as if they're unassailable. And if you've been following the news, right, we know blockchain is not unassailable, right? I can talk a little bit more about that. But I was at college during the Morris worm. Y'all have studied that maybe. That's one of the first really widespread computer worms. And the thing I'll say about that I was going to save to the end, but this seems a good time to talk about it, is that most security issues present themselves not as security issues. Most security issues present themselves as, holy crap, something's not working right. We found out about the Morris worm because everything was really slow and everyone started to run out of disk space and that kind of thing. So when I was in college, I worked for the graphics lab, which at the time meant Tektronix raster terminals, and those are really cool, and there were vector terminals, and everything was like a green screen. It was really neat. The fact that the Tektronix actually had color, it was this amazing new thing. It was cool. So I had a little bit of hopping around after college, after which I started at the Chatham County government in Savannah. And during that time, I presided over wonderful things like the I Love You virus, SQL Slammer. I wrote a couple of these down there. Code Red and CLES. After which, having survived all these things, I took a job as Director of Professional Services for an infrastructure and security consulting company. it was at this point that I realized that most so-called enterprise networks are really not made out of titanium, but mostly with tissue paper and spit and gum and string, and they look just like human beings who are very busy would design them, right? So, it made me never want to deposit my money in a bank ever again, right? Working with banks and hospitals, similar, right? I never wanted to get sick ever again. So after that, and well, I should say during that, I've always been really interested with security research because I started life out as, we will recall, a coder and a tinkerer. So I've always been interested in exploring the edges. And really anybody who's a gamer understands that, right? You just keep following the right edge until it leads you somewhere, right? And you're an explorer. And so during my career, both at Chatham County and then afterwards with the consulting company, I continued to research. And there's an operating system not around anymore called Novell and a directory service called NDS that I found a hole in, and that was kind of neat. And then around 2004, when I was writing a column for a magazine called Network Computing, which still exists, but it's not quite as robust as it once was, I published some research about what is now called spear phishing, right? This notion that by crafting a specially crafted HTML message and getting someone to click on it, like, hi, I'm the CEO, you should check out this article from Forbes. So I did a little bit of research with a multinational law firm and a bank, and of course everyone falls for this stuff, right? So that taught me something as well, and I'll share a little bit about that. Somewhere in there I co-authored a couple of chapters of a book called Maximum Security, which, back in the day I guess was one of the authoritative texts on this stuff. But of course, as we know in security, go to lunch, fall behind. So I hung up my real security spurs in 2005 when I came to be CIO for City of Asheville. We don't talk about our specific security posture, right? As you might imagine, it's based on least privilege. At the same time, I am famous for saying the way you identify an IT sociopath is that they like to say phrases like, no, because security. Which is bullshit. Because security's table stakes. To play, you must secure. No one pays you $100,000 a year to create an insecure network. Hey, Tammy, I'd like you to put this server together and make sure it's not secure, okay? Will you do that for me? Nobody does that. So security's table stakes, and you can't do things like make things not usable by people and transmit the message to serve you better and secure you. We've made it so that you can't do your job. So there's this dynamic tension, and you all know this, but it rears its head up in some situations. And like I said, I'm going to tell you about dumb things I did, so I'll get there, and I'll tell you about one dumb thing I did that harmed usability. We're in a regulatory environment at the city that includes financial audits. We're financially regulated by the Local Government Commission, which is an agency of the state that makes sure that local governments don't do dumb things and go bankrupt. We're regulated by the FBI for criminal justice information systems and NCIC access, that's National Crime Information Center access, right? Because criminal history record information, CHRI, it's pretty serious not to breach that, right? So there's a lot of rules about that. We are further regulated, because who doesn't like being regulated? we have to produce certain stuff for police department accreditation, and that's CALIA accreditation, so we have to help with that. And of course, we're subject to all the normal stuff that you would expect, like PCI, right? I will tell you that one of the lessons learned from a career doing this stuff is that it's not that your end user is your weakest link. It's that your end user can be your best friend if you actually let her do it. If you actually bring them into the fold, they can be your best friend. And so, I'll tell you a quick story. We had something the other day, and I can talk about this. We had a phishing attempt where they tried to trick our payroll administrator into, change my bank account. I need to change my bank account. So could you do that? Could you just send me that form? Or got the form somehow, and here's my old bank, or here's my new bank. Just put my paycheck in there, my direct deposit. And listen, I give our payroll administrator a lot of credit, but I give my staff a lot of credit because of, 5, 6, maybe even 7 years ago, time goes by quicker and quicker when you're old. It's like the end of a toilet paper roll. Anyway, a number of years ago, we started this education thing, right? And so we, I believe, have taught people well that if something seems funny, stop. You don't have to speed through everything. And because the payroll administrator stopped and said, something doesn't look right, she called the employee and said, let me ask you about this change of deposit form that you sent in. And of course, it was, the typical my name at longdomain.com that starts with Asheville, right? And so that part didn't get caught. But because we've taught people to be adequately suspicious, and because she bought into that, she said something's not right. She called the person, and the person said, no, I did not do that. And it turned out to be, some bank in California, and we turned it over to the police because what do we learn in cybersecurity? When there's a crime being committed, is IT in charge or is law enforcement in charge? When there's a crime being committed, it is law enforcement, right? So we turned that over to law enforcement. So I believe that social engineering is about 20 times as strong as just plain old vanilla hacking. Because if you can get the authorized person to do what you want them to do, you don't have to bypass any authorization, right? It's the equivalent of, it's Fort Knox, and somebody rolls up in a pizza truck and goes, free pizza for everybody, and you let them in. Of course you don't let them in. But I don't think that has been a shared responsibility until the last few years. Now you're starting to see, I told you I wrote a column for Network Computing. I also used to write a column for Information Week, and I was writing that column when Target got breached, right? And one of the things, I either predicted it, well, who cares if I predicted it or not? It was pretty clear that the CEO was going down. And the CEO did go down pretty hard. And I think one of the reasons they brought in a very seasoned CIO, it was not a grow your own CIO. They brought in the ex-CIO, I think of Home Depot, right, who had retired. And I think one of the reasons they did that was to understand, are the IT things being done right? Because remember, IT can't do anything that the business doesn't let them do or fund, right? And so if you have all these insecure pin pads and you've asked for funding again and again and again and again, and you don't get funding, is it IT's fault? Of course it's not. So it's a partnership, but part of that partnership is we have to educate folks because they don't live in our world and they assume IT's got that, or the coders got that. And we know that's not true, but we have to tell them that that's not true or else we're falling down in our job. I wanted to mention that the Mountain Express has an article about City of Asheville security posture that has some of our education posters. And one of the things I like about our education posters is they are this techie, right? One of them shows a burnt out room, like your house just burned down. And it asks a simple, emotionally evocative question, which is, what would you do if you lost all of your computer files? Pictures of grandma, first recording of your kid talking, whatever it is. Nobody wants that. And so if you read about organizational change, which is what any security initiative is really about, right? Because it's an ever-changing landscape, go to lunch, fall behind. It's all about change management. It's all, and what is change management? Change management is about hearts and minds. You can emotionally sway folks when intellect fails. Unfortunately, you see that in the political spin cycle, but we won't go there. But that's one of the things that I think has been really helpful for us, right? Is we go to folks and say, think about it. What if this happened to you? Now, by no means does that mean we are safe, because obviously, as you all know, a breach can happen anytime, anywhere, to anybody. The question is, how resilient are you? It's not a question of, does it happen, because it will happen. The question is, how prepared are you? Have you done anything? I mean, do you have the basics, right? As a consultant, I was frequently shocked at how few organizations had adequate backups, patching, virus protection. Well, we don't want to patch because, we have this fragile little snowflake over here, and if we patch it, it might not behave right. Would you rather it not behave right today, or would you rather somebody hack it tomorrow, as an insider job or whatever? So I think you gotta pay attention to the basics before you start with the really complex layer 7 firewalls, endpoint protection, host intrusion prevention, That's all great. But if you're doing that and you don't have the basics, you're barring the front door, but the back door is wide open. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. Let me tell you about a mistake I made. At the beginning of our security awareness, I invited a speaker, read an article, liked the article, invited the speaker. Did not vet the speaker. Let me tell you why this was a mistake. The speaker gets up in front of department heads, in front of finance folks, and proceeds to tell them how we're all doomed because the EMP is coming and we're all going to have to be preppers. And there are foreign nationals among us, even today. It was a little scary. I mean, it wasn't scary in the, this is something reasonable to happen. It was the scary as in, oh dear Lord, I've allowed a lunatic to take the podium. And that cost us credibility. And the only way you get people to change their behavior is with the coin of credibility. We earn that every day in the world of app dev, in the world of customer service, in the world of ops. If stuff's not running, expect people not to think that you are a reliable source of information. If every time you push an app update, it screws up their workflow, expect people not to listen to you about security practices because you've lost credibility, right? So what I did, inviting a frickin' lunatic to address a number of people and waste their time, was a huge mistake. Okay, so that's free. You don't have to pay anything for that.
How would you know ahead of time?
I think that if I had seen, a demo reel or gone to a talk or, asked this person to kind of give a 5-minute TED talk in front of like my staff, that would have been a lot better than, sort of inviting him behind the firewall, so to speak, to address everybody. Second lesson is don't assume that your infrastructure staff has the user experience in mind. And when I say this, I say it with all the love in my heart, but here's how infrastructure engineers think. Well, I don't want anything to happen. Good, right? This is great. So far, so good. So by default, we block things like porn sites. Big green check mark. I like that. We don't allow gambling sites. That's cool. We don't allow malware sites. Totally cool. And we're not going to allow any uncategorized sites because, those might be uncategorized porn or malware sites. Wrong answer. Because when you do that, as one job I had where they set that to allow uncategorized no, you shut off the internet for a large number of people because there are all kinds of doctors' offices, law firms, small businesses, nut and bolt manufacturer, et cetera, that do not have categorized websites. Okay, so do not make the mistake, like I did once upon a time, of assuming that infrastructure engineers have the user experience in mind. And what have we already discussed? Credibility is the only way that you get end user engagement. And when you turn off the internet for a third of the sites they're trying to browse, that might not be the best way to get them to engage with you. I'm sure that Dr. Drawer has talked about this. There is no secure or insecure. It's all about risk management, right? I don't really want to spend $100 to protect $5. There are, and I think that uncategorized is a great example of risk management. There is a risk, right? But how do we mitigate the risk? And the answer is we mitigate risks with things like Layer 7 firewalls, with deep inspection, with endpoint protection, things like that. The way to mitigate that risk is not by shutting off the internet for people. It's by doing other things to keep them safe. There's also, of course, risk benefit, right? I think it's been pretty common for folks to allow other foreign supplier networks to, for example, VPN directly in. And, for the purposes of whatever. Great example is telemetry. Let's say that you have outsourced HVAC. Oh, well, we need to give you a VPN in here. Well, that may be true, but that risk nowadays, and look up your breaches. Trusted suppliers are a big source of breaches. And why would you give them an all seasons pass with a VPN when you could accomplish the same thing by giving them extraordinarily limited powers to do X or Y, right? Which goes back to least privilege, for God's sake. But there are times when the risk-benefit ratio works in the user's favor, and you have to be okay with that, or you're sociopath IT. And there are times when the risk-benefit ratio works in the opposite direction, where you say the risk is too great, and here's how we're going to take care of that need, right? Because you can't just say no because security. See also sociopath, right? Okay. So final observation. This work isn't ever done. See also go to lunch, fall behind. And you have a choice. You can treat your business partners like idiots and never explain anything and never ask them for help. Or you can treat them like valuable partners and smart people who can understand this stuff, at least, on the level they need to, and treat them with great civility and respect. Which one do you think gets better results? And that's all I have to say about that, and I'm happy to have a conversation, take some questions, whatever works for y'all.
So students have submitted some questions, and I gotta say, I love all your questions. So I'm hoping to get through more than a few. So I think I'd like to start off with.
And if y'all want to yell some out, that's okay with me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so.
I'm gonna sort of direct the
Okay, great.
and then maybe we'll just open it up.
Yeah, great.
So Emma, your first questions.
So you've traveled kind of all over the world, to places like China, New Zealand, and Australia.
Yes.
To share your experience about what you've learned with information technology. Did you get to see how these other countries deal with information security? And if so, is it treated mostly the same across these different places, or are there any differences you noticed in priorities or how they do things with regard to information security?
It's a great question. Let me start with China, right? Because China is easy, right? China, I took a burner phone. I did not take my laptop. I had just heard way too much about you leave your laptop and then you come back and it has malware, right? I have heard way too much about that from, I'm lucky enough to be plugged into like a super duper security brain trust back from when I was doing security research, and I don't do that anymore, and I'm like 100 years behind in security, right? But I know who to ask. And so China has this really bad reputation for you go there and you bring back something, or all your files have been scraped or whatever. Which I know doesn't address the how do they deal with it. I will say that when I took my burner phone, I did experience the Great Firewall of China. I will tell you that yes, it is possible to VPN out of China. I'm just saying for a friend, you understand. And I think that the biggest difference in China is that there's no nice way to say it, it's a dictatorship, and it's state censorship, and it's about control. And so I think the big difference in China as opposed to in a democratic society is, everything goes through the central authority. New Zealand, Australia, and frankly, I have a lot of folks who live internationally. I think that it's not all that different, right? They have the same problems with breaches. They have the same problems with people want to make their password 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 on their iPhone or whatever. And frankly, a lot of US platforms, right, like Windows, we won't talk about China, Macs get sold. I could have bought an iPhone in New Zealand or Australia. So I don't think it's that different. The big striking difference for me was in China. So thanks for that.
Thank you. So next on the list is Lawrence. Your question number 1.
Okay. Hey, Lawrence. Thanks.
So, in an article titled, "Can a Team Have Too Much Cohesion? The Dark Side to Network Density," published in Science Direct, a statistician named Sean Wise empirically found that teams of people with a lot of cohesion tended to work well together initially, but that this initial boost falls off over time in an inverse U-shaped relationship because of groupthink. So my question is, how do you avoid falling into groupthink when you organize teams of people?
Wait, let me scan the article. Okay. I think that so I tweeted something the other day about how to build a great team. And one of the things that I tweeted was invite dissent, right? I think that I happen to agree with the conclusion of the article, is that a cohesive team very quickly can become a group thinking team. The beautiful thing about human beings is we love to conflict. And I think that in many what I would call dysfunctional teams, conflict is to be avoided at all costs. If we conflict, we're not acting like a team. Bullshit. If we conflict, we are being a team. We are making things better. Note, I do not say we are brutal towards one another or nasty to one another. There is this notion, in psychology of constructive conflict versus destructive conflict, right? If we had more time, I would talk about the way I tell that to my son. But if you all want to visit afterwards, it's humorous but not directly related. So I think that innovation can never happen when things are same. And I believe that one of IT's mandates is to be innovative. And one of the things that I note about innovation, it is the enemy of operations, right? Because when something breaks, what is the first question you ask in operations? What the hell has changed, right? And what is innovation? Change. So I think in a functional team, you are inviting conflict. You are making it very clear that you're not talking about destructive conflict, but you are not doing this Pollyanna nonsense of a nice team doesn't have any conflict, right? That's my answer anyway. Thanks.
Patrick Korth, question number 1.
Patrick.
Hello. Let's see. What framework or criteria do you use to attempt to divide or balance the resources at your disposal between enhancing infrastructure or adopting new technology that will create efficiency, safety, etc., but simultaneously trying to maintain the current infrastructure at a level acceptable to the people using it?
I love the question. So I'm going to start kind of repeating the intent because I think maybe the mic's not picking it up. So the intent of the question, I think, was how do you balance resourcing among making things better, secure,
And keeping them working.
and keeping things running, right? And I have this model. Can I whiteboard? Is that okay if I whiteboard? So I have this model where when we do strategic planning, we take these things into account, right? We have something we call core services. And this is dial tone, right? I mean, literally dial tone, right? We have voice over IP. But it's stuff like switches. It's all the stuff that we do at 3 o'clock in the morning when all of the other people are asleep. And stuff like help desk, right? And then sort of on top of that, we have to think about 4 quadrants, because there are always 4 quadrants, right? And so in our case, we have the council, and we have the community. We have a city manager, right? So our chief executive. and sort of the CXOs. And then down here we have all these working groups, which are interdepartmental. And we get together with those groups and we say, well, what are the business goals, right? And then down here, we've got the operating environment, okay? And that's where things like emerging threats come in, right? There's a wonderful graphic that I think F-Secure did about showing how many breaches per year happen, or how much malware there is, and there's plenty of data suggesting that security is just accelerating, or security issues are just accelerating, which is unfortunate, which is why we have to put more resources into it. And then on top of that, we build kind of the ITS operating principles and strategic plan, right? And part of that plan is how are we resourcing? And like everything else, sometimes you have to say to yourself, we can't afford this. And it probably comes down to, in a security context, the risk-benefit ratio again, right? If there's something that if you could spend enough money, I guess you could secure your network really, 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 really well, but you'd go broke. So, it's a balancing act, is really my answer, but it's a balancing act that has to be informed by all these things. We got to keep stuff running. That's a given. Because if we don't keep things running, guess what we lose? Most critically, we lose the coin of credibility that we need, see also, to have the engagement of our business partners to actually protect the enterprise. But balancing act in the context of these things. Good question. Thank you.
Thanks. Devin, number 2.
Hey, Deb. Hey, how's it going? So you already kind of hit on this a little bit, but I got a question is, past speaker, we had stated one of the most important factors to his organization remaining secure is end user education. And the follow-up to that is, what types of education programs are in place relating to your IT structure?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because I meant to say earlier, and I didn't, that at employee orientation, we do have some employee training about cyber. Like, that's standard. You get hired at the city of Asheville, you learn about cybersecurity. Other than that, so a couple of years ago, or I guess maybe even a decade ago, I don't even know, I had this real interest in marketing, right? Because marketing, as it turns out, is the way that you communicate really important things to your customers, right? And so I got this wild hair about it, and I just started learning a lot about it. And one of the things you learn in marketing is that not everybody takes information in the same way. As it turns out, if the only way that you have to give me information on how to, say, drive my new car is with a video, I'm gonna crash that mother as soon as I leave the lot, because I won't watch a video, okay? Everybody takes in information differently. Some people need to hear things many times before it sinks in. So multi-channel, multi-touch is the other way that we think about security education. So I already mentioned we had posters. We do campaigns. Like a lot of organizations, we do phishing tests. We do phishing fire drills. If you read that Mountain Express article, you'll read a funny story. Something that happened to me when I was moving my son into his dorm room. And we just continue to communicate. We continue to do it in person. We continue to do it written. There's video training we offer. There's web-based training. And when you actually click on a fake link in our phishing drills, you get redirected to more education. So multi-factor, multi-channel, multi-touch. What else?
What's next on my list? Morgan, question number 1.
Hey, Morgan.
Hi. When you're playing your role as an IT rehab coach, what is something important that you look for in an organization to help turn it around? And is there a common problem most organizations you have worked with have had?
Yes. So that's referring to my my bad habit of earlier in my career, just kind of working to make IT organizations a lot more functional and a lot less dysfunctional, right? So, talk about multi-factor. There's a lot of reasons why IT doesn't work, but I think primarily the biggest reason why IT doesn't work is that it is structured to be all about the technology. And IT is actually not all about the technology. The technology is important in the same way that medicine is important, and imaging and diagnostics are important to the medical profession. But fundamentally, medicine's about patient care. And one of my big arguments over the last couple decades has been that IT is really about people. It's not really about the technology, qua technology. And when folks stop realizing that, or when they've never begun with that, things don't go well, right? And I don't know why exactly that is, but I find that to make IT less screwed up, number one, you got to make sure that the staff aren't miserable, because as it turns out, prisoners don't render great service. Number two, you've got to start meeting commitments, because again, coin of credibility. If you are not meeting your commitments, a funny thing happens. People seek elsewhere to get those commitments met. Number three, I think you have to focus. A lot of IT organizations, because they're not really purposeful in terms of getting business done, because that's not our job, wrong. They don't have projects that are focused squarely in on meeting those business requirements, right? So for example, a big city council objective for the city of Asheville is equity. Guess what's in my business plan, right? Guess what we have done? Guess whose website is now translatable to many, many languages? Because equity is a priority for the council, and therefore something called digital inclusion has to be a priority for us, right? So aligning those goals is important, but also restricting the number of goals. Because when everything's a priority, nothing is a priority. That's right. And stuff that is a priority will get done. So I think that's, the 30-second. Great question. Thank you.
Let's see, Luke, question number 3. Over here.
Luke?
Yes.
You stated in a 2016 interview that the reasoning for shadow IT existing was because of the current IT department is not fulfilling the need of the businesses.
Preach it.
Would you say this is still true today, and what is your current opinion of shadow IT?
So I'm going to repeat the question. I stated that in 2016, you guys have really done your research. Good job. That I said the reason why shadow IT exists is because IT is not meeting the needs of the business. I still believe that. I still define shadow IT. It makes me crazy when people say shadow IT. Because if you were actually partnering, people would come to you, as they do with us, and they say, well, what do you think? We've got a problem. We got a this, we got a that we need to figure out. I still think that's true largely. I think in 2019, cloud is so pervasive that I think sometimes folks don't understand that even though they have a really good relationship with IT, and even though IT is meeting their needs, sometimes they think, but then I can swipe my credit card and I can use this thing over here and I'll be fine because other people do that, right? I don't really call that shadow IT, but I think that it can be dangerous to the organization because all of a sudden you don't have folks who are asking the right questions. I still think generally in 2019, that kind of thing can be okay. But riddle me this, if you're taking credit cards without finance being in the loop, and you're processing data without IT being in the loop, and then you have a breach, whose problem is that? Right? So I think generally there are two reasons nowadays, right? One is ignorance, and two is the IT organization is not giving what's needed. But I think more in 2019 than 2016, if there's not adequate education on why IT needs to be part of the equation when you're getting software as a service, right? If you haven't educated appropriately, that could be another reason. So.
Samuel Hodges. That's three really great questions, and I cannot decide. I sort of want to ask one and two.
Maybe we start with two.
Good question.
Hey, Sam. Hi. Nice to meet you. Question number two. What, if anything, can the government do to combat the spread of misinformation in technology, such as the use of Russian bots in the 2016 election? And at what point does the prevention of things like fake news start to become censorship?
Man, a role of government question in a cybersecurity class. I think that's good. I think it's a great question. I mean, it's not, propaganda is not really my wheelhouse. I'll take a swing at it, but obviously, responsible use of services has to be a priority. I work for a government, so you're not going to see me saying that the government should never regulate anything. I think there's a very anti-government sentiment in this country right now, to the point where startups, right? And remember, all of these social media sites were startups once upon a time, but there's an anti-government sentiment to the point where they're emboldened to break the law and, for example, drop off hundreds of scooters in downtown and not be authorized to do so. I'm speaking for a friend, naturally. So there's an emboldened culture in startups to where they feel like, no one's going to support government regulation. So I think until that changes, and until folks look at government regulation as we, the people, are trying to keep each other safe and informed, and have a financially level playing field, whatever government regulation means, which is when the government, which is a bit of a leviathan, regulates, if it is to limit some activities so that everyone can be safe, I think that sentiment's got to swing back before anything's going to happen with that. That's my personal opinion.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Do you mind if I ask my first question too?
Yeah.
Just spit it out.
All right. And then my first question is, do you believe that our election technology is secure enough from
No.
malicious attackers?
I do not.
I don't want to ask like what is like.
No, that's fine. I mean, listen, I began my career, I should say, I have very close friends who used to do something called crack video games, right? And so observing that, I'm very convinced that, I became convinced then that anything that one person could obfuscate, another person could deobfuscate. I'm also a keen observer of people like Bunny Huang. Look him up. He's a very interesting hardware hacker. Notably, the guy who defeated the Xbox copy protection and, whatever. Super double secret encryption at the board level, I think not even video games can be adequately copy protected, so I think there's gonna have to be some kind of hybrid technology to take care of voting. I do not think that we are ready technologically or process-wise for election technology. When breaches stop happening, we can talk about it. Until then, forget it.
Thank you.
You bet. Great questions.
All right, bridging off of the startup stuff, the other side of it.
Oh,
I see what you-
yes, how are you doing? Asheville is a really big startup town, especially for tech companies. I know because I interned for one and worked for another.
Nice.
How has the growing startup culture in Asheville affected your job and the amount of consulting?
So I don't do a lot of consulting nowadays. Funny enough, I was one of a couple of people who brought Startup Weekend to town back in the day. And back in the day, I was a big startup booster because I really, really believe that this town can support a thriving startup scene. So I'm glad to see that it has gotten bigger. And there's a lot of players in that. There's Venture Asheville has been fantastic, both before Josh Dorfman and after Josh Dorfman. For me, I love seeing the startup scene for one particular reason. It means that there are people here in town. There's an ecosystem of folks who know how to code, of folks who know how to do ops, of folks who know how to do customer service. And not surprisingly, I have hired from that pool. So yay, startup scene. Thank you. And talent acquisition and retention and development is probably one of my most important jobs because it is a people business. And if we don't have the right people, we cannot get the right results. Next question.
Bridging off of that, Patrick Branson, question number 1.
Again, all right.
Hey, Patrick.
Hi, good afternoon. Referring to a previous CIO we had from the corporate world, that's the same question here. Your LinkedIn profile shows that you started as Chief Technology Manager within the municipal environment, as you mentioned previously, Savannah, where you simultaneously earned your Master of Science degree in Management and Technology, followed by other high-level positions before finally becoming CIO for the city of Asheville. For those whose goal is to become CIO, what path would you recommend or suggest they follow? What educational goals with training and certification would you recommend?
That's a great question. So the question was, what would I recommend to folks who want to be CIO eventually? I have long said, and I'm going to say it again, that I believe project manager is the job that most prepares you for the CIO chair. And there's a good reason for that. I have found that most of the things that have made me successful as a CIO are the same things that made me a successful project manager. keeping your customers front and center, making sure that it's about outcomes, not just about tasks. Getting folks to do what you need them to do through influence and not through direct control, right? Remember, the only folks who report to me at City of Asheville are the folks in the IT organization. But I regularly need to influence the behaviors of not just department directors, but folks who work in departments. So that role of influencer with no formal authority is so valuable. And you learn that really, really well as a project manager. So relationship management, I cannot tell you how many times something that has almost gone off the rails is saved because there's an existing relationship, there's credibility, there's trust, right? All those things you have to have as a project manager. And if you can't do that as a project manager, you will not be magically able to do it as a CIO. Great question. Thank you.
So Brian Rumsey, question number 3.
So, how do you protect your critical systems from ransomware attacks?
Well, again, I don't want to delve into specifics, but I will say that many ransomware attacks could be recovered from relatively rapidly if the basics are in place. And remember, the basics are, not just virus protection, which maybe doesn't catch it. Nowadays, I think the basics are layer 7 firewalls, and sometimes that catches it. But God forbid it gets in, God forbid you're running on a system that has endpoint protection and that doesn't catch it either. Well, you have to go back to basics, right? Because all the things I just mentioned were really highfalutin. But it's amazing how many times you read about ransomware and they can't do the simple task of restore from backup, which I was doing 30 years ago, more often than I'd like to admit. So I think obviously it's a layered approach. You have to have layered defenses. But ultimately, if you're not taking care of the basics and those fancy things don't work because somebody clever has gotten more clever, go to lunch, fall behind, you have to be able to restore your files. And if you can't do that, something is very wrong. Next question.
Jacob Cumberland, I'm going to have you ask 2 and 3 together. I feel like they're linked.
Okay.
Hey, Jacob.
So if you were to go over there and then down, we have our own ITS. And I was going to ask, what is like a pet peeve that you wish IT service workers would never do? And if there's anything that you know that you specifically value in an IT service worker. And at the same time, if someone were to work in the public sector, what is something that you wish ahead of time they would know or do before going into that field?
So there's a couple things that drive me crazy, because I'm from New York, I'm Jewish Italian, I get excited, So I have pet peeves. The first one is no because security, right? That drives me crazy. I don't care what sector you're in. It's basically saying I'm not going to do my job, right? The second one is to not understand that there is a reason for all these systems and services and servers and networks. And the next part of the question was, what do I look for in folks?
It was more like if someone were to go to work in the public sector, what is something they should know or take to heart ahead of time?
So I think if you're going to work in the public sector, you better have a sense of mission. But funny thing, I think that about every vertical. If you don't have a sense of mission, you're not, if you don't, it's not necessarily believe in the mission, although I think you really have to believe in the mission. But if you are not trying to advance the mission, you might as well not be working there, right? I am lucky enough to know some really fantastic CIOs, including, a number of folks. And whether they're in baseball, San Francisco Giants, funny thing, when they win the World Series, all the IT people get a ring. Cool, right? But they have an incredible sense of mission. They're all about baseball, right? From wineries, I could get behind that, to local government. My best employees are the ones that want to keep police officers safe and efficient. They want to keep the community safe. They want to make sure that when you call 911 and it's your brother who's having a heart attack, that emergency responder is there as quickly as possible without undue delay. They're also the people who care deeply about issues in front of the council, from equity to affordable housing to just having good governance and making sure that the city we live in is the best city we can create together. So if you're going into public service, you better like it, because you're not going to make as much money, number one. And number two, I think when you have that sense of mission and you go into any vertical, you're going to do better, right? Because you're going to have that aha moment. You're going to say, wow, I know something about civics because I'm really into civics. And it occurs to me that if we did this in a different way, maybe we would get a better outcome, right? And so you're going to do better work. Thanks. Jacob.
So I was just wondering if you could give us a little bit of an insight of, your day-to-day duties as a CIO, and to what degree do you take a security-driven adversarial mindset in those day-to-day duties?
So I think it's everybody's job to have that mindset, that there's an adversary out there and that the adversary is coming for us, right? And we are not done. We are never done. And it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. So that is front and center, right? At the same time, my day-to-day duties aren't always about security, right? Security may be laced through those things. For example, we are, I'm not supposed to call it a data warehouse because it's not a data warehouse, but we have a data repository. I forget what they're calling it today, One of our core values is we poke fun at each other, but so we have this data repository. And there are a couple of things about security that come up, right? Which are like, should we be keeping PII, personally identifiable information in that? And the answer is a big no when it's publicly accessible data. Like if you go to data.asheville.nc.gov, you can download a crap ton of data about the city. But you're not going to get PII from there, right? At the same time, we do have to house a certain amount of PII. However, when we use the data repository for things like data interchange with other agencies, that actually improves our security posture because it makes the attack surface, the notion of attack surface, right? So if you have a smaller attack surface, that generally is a more secure thing. When you're securing fewer things, basically, you can do it better, right? It's like when you have one kid You know, you can just take care of the kid. And when you have 4 kids, it's like zone defense and you're just looking all over the place, right? So that's sort of an example of how we think about security whenever we're doing anything. Day to day, I go to a lot of meetings, you know, which is unfortunate. At the same time, I view my job as Chief Marketing Officer for IT Services, Chief Customer Officer for the city, right? So I hear end user pain before IT hears it, right? And so one of my jobs is to make sure that gets translated into action. You know, we've got to get rid of the pain. It's such a varied job. Like, my job is so interesting because no 2 days are the same. You know, I'm going to a financial budget retreat tomorrow, spending all day doing that. Doesn't that sound like fun? You know, and we might be answering data questions for city council, and I'm kind of, you know, catching those and putting them to the right people. I might be meeting with a university professor trying to, you know, figure out what we can do with job pipeline. I might be meeting with our equity coordinator and seeing how can we help, you know, both from a data perspective, from a digital inclusion perspective. It's a lot of coordination, right? It's a lot of, it's not a lot of, I am doing something. I'm doing a lot of coordination of activities. You know, when it comes down to doing stuff like strategy, I'm in there getting my hands dirty. But at the same time, I'm not above taking care of, you know, I was in a meeting the other day, and somebody who was going to take care of putting together the meeting notes and the to-do list had to go, you know, child emergency. So I sat down and I did that. You know, it is other duties as assigned every day. It is a very interesting job. When I came here, I thought I would be here 3 years, get bored and move on. Haven't gotten bored yet. Thanks.
Peter. Debating between number 1 and number 2. Do you want? Or actually, number 3. Any of your questions? It's not awesome.
Well, speaking of wearing different hats, what strategies work best to convince people to spend the money that you think is needed to have adequate security?
It all comes down to what's in it for me, right? I think that one of the ways we've been successful with security education is that we have focused not just on being safe at work, we've focused on keeping you safe at your home computer. And the reason for that is because I don't believe people have a different security posture at home and at work, right? If you're careless, you're careless. If you're super hyper aware and adequately suspicious, as we say, then you're there home and at work. And so that's one aspect of it, is that we tell folks we want you to be safe at home, and they say, oh, that's wonderful. I want to be safe at home also, because I don't want my credit card breached. The other aspect of it is that we connect the dots and let folks know that our systems actually have stuff in it that if it's breached, it can harm you. It can harm the city, it can harm our finances, but it can harm your finances, right? Because, for example, no big surprise, like everybody else in the known universe, we distribute your W-2 electronically. Guess what your W-2 has on it? Well, I mean, not that your social security number is a secret after the Experian breach, right? But, you know, we sort of connect the dots for folks, because I I think with most human interaction, folks want to know, I mean, folks obviously are higher minded, higher purpose when they buy into the mission, that's great. But everybody also wants to know, is my paycheck going to get stolen? And am I personally going to be harmed from this? So I think just connecting the dots to the to how things can personally affect you has, I think, been very effective for us. Thanks.
More question for all
Hey, Aaron. Come in. Appreciate it. How large is the actual security team? And do you guys have openings or plans to expand? What's the roadmap look like?
So we have a security coordinator that we're about to hire. It's been interesting because we have always had a distributed security responsibilities. The dumbest thing that I've seen companies do is say, hey, we're going to hire a chief security officer. Done. Now we're done. Now we're going to be secure. And that did happen. Remember, I'm very old. And when I worked for Chatham County and we got this connection to the internet, I had folks who, on the infrastructure team who said, let's just plug it in. We'll just route it. And of course, we did not do that. But there weren't firewalls. There were no hardware firewalls that we could buy at that time, right? So again, back in the midst of time, this notion of chief security officer came up, and there were those who thought, gee, we'll hire a chief security officer. Check, done. And what ends up happening is that one person gets very frustrated, and then they're out of there, right? So I intend to keep that security responsibility distributed. We've got 27 folks on staff. And we're bringing in the security coordinator because I feel like we got to up our game in a couple of ways. And I think that's nothing but what I was talking about before, the operating environment. Like, the attacks are just more and more and more. And the problem is, a central problem of, I think, of modern security is it is really hard. It's getting really hard to separate the noise from the signal, right? And so one of this person's primary roles will be separate that noise from the signal. What's actually going on there, in the wild? As we've already discussed, we don't talk about our security posture or specific software or systems, and that's not unusual. Nobody does that, except, as I know from my own career, security practitioners do talk to one another, right? So I'm hoping to get more of a flow of information. I'm hoping to get more folks aware and coordinated, and the actions kind of better synchronized. And yes, we're always hiring. We're hiring, at the moment, we're looking for a back-end developer on the app dev side. And we are also hiring that security coordinator. And I have a feeling we're going to be hiring for something else. cityofasheville.github.io is one place where we put our jobs. I'm hoping that with the new website, which is beta.asheville.nc.gov, which is a redesigned website based on usability principles and based on user testing and all that kind of good stuff. When the beta site goes live, I'm hoping to put what's on cityofasheville.github.io directly on our city website. But for now, that's where it is. Thanks for the question.
Thank you.
I sort of want to just open it up now. If anyone has any pressing questions, I have a couple of favorites that you've submitted that no one's volunteered. I might volunteer you. But anyone have any other questions? Either we wrote down or not?
Yes, sir.
So you mentioned law enforcement. Do you think law enforcement is capable of handling some of these matters?
when I say law enforcement, I'm not talking about a beat cop. I'm not talking about somebody on patrol. I'm talking about somebody who's like gone to school, on the detective squad, has learned tools like NCASE, knows about forensics, chain of custody, and that type of thing. We all used to laugh about the FBI, I mean, it was laughable, in the 80s, even into the 90s. It was just crazy. Somewhere in the mid 2000s, they started to get it, and I think, not to be political, I even think that there may be even some overreach going on nowadays. I think that there are folks on law enforcement who are committed to the responsible use of forensic technologies in a court-sanctioned way, in a lawful manner, in a fair manner, more than there ever have been. But no, of course, a patrol officer's not going to know anything about that. Great question. What else? Yes, sir. What's your name?
I'm Jake. Hey, Jake. So you were recently quoted just a couple days ago, actually, in an article about emotional intelligence.
Oh, yes. My friends at the Enterprisers Project.
And I was just wondering, you talk about emotional intelligence from a boss's perspective. Back on the topic of hiring, because I'm sure we're all interested in that.
Great. Bring it on.
As an interviewer, as a person who hires people, do you have any ways of probing for self-awareness or emotional intelligence in interviews, or is there a way that you look for it?
Yes. So, there are no trick questions, right? One tricks oneself in an interview. But one that I see folks stumble on is when I say to you, here's a project, you need to go get it done. What's your approach? If you dive straight into configuring hardware, bye, see ya, right? I want to hear about, I want to hear you talk about, well, first I need to know what outcome are we looking for? I want to know who's going to be affected. Is that in my scope? I mean, it's fine to ask questions, right? But if there's nothing about outcomes when I ask you about a project, we're done, and it's not intended to be a trick question, but I think it's really important that any project have the right outcomes. And if you're not checking that before you start jumping into implementation, it's kind of like someone says, well, I'd like you to build a house, and you just start winging around a hammer and some 2x4s and nails. You don't even have a plan, right? So I look for that. I look for, is this somebody who's going to be thoughtful about approach, and who does it harm, and who does it help, and what's the resourcing, who are the stakeholders? I mean, I don't think you need to get all goopy about it, but at the same time, not to address that at all is kind of nuts. Another one, don't you hate the interview question, what's your worst thing? My worst thing is that when I'm rescuing nuns, I sometimes feel a sense of resentment. So, I hate questions like that. We try not to use questions like that. But I think one great question that some people stumble on is, tell me about a time when you were working on a project and somebody was doing something counterproductive to the project. And what we're looking for there is, how do you deal with conflict? Because believe it or not, it happens. And I'm not looking for somebody who's a rager, and I'm not looking for somebody who's a pushover. I'm looking for somebody who can respectfully deal with it You know, I'm not looking for you to be the boss or the supervisor, but do you ever work in teams here at UNC? Right? You ever have to tell a team member, knock it off? Right? Or it would be nice if you contributed something, right? I mean, come on, who hasn't had that person on their team, right? I got what you got, you know. We'll just use your answer. So I think those are two good ones, you know, and I'm happy to stick around afterwards and chat a little bit more. What else? Emma, Twitter. Are you on Twitter?
I am not on
Right now? Oh, okay.
But I noticed that you have a Twitter, and
I do.
I imagine that social media is a lot like a double-edged sword for you.
Oh, yeah.
What are your thoughts on it, and how do you manage it as someone who works in IT?
That is a great question, and especially someone who's in public life. Okay? When I started with Twitter, I thought, I will have two handles. One will be my Underbar J. Feldman handle, and the other one will be AVL-CIO. And when I'm speaking with AVL-CIO, it'll be official. And when I'm speaking as Underbar J. Feldman, it'll be just me being crazy, which we know I'm crazy. As it turns out, I do not have a split personality. And I noticed, as I did my little journey into social media, I noticed that it didn't matter if you said, you know, public information person or finance person or IT person for a city or county or whatever, or company. If you act like a dumbass on social media, your company will be mad about it. You don't have two people, you have one person, and they will find out that you work for the Biltmore Company, or they will find out that you're a police officer or whatever. So I am unapologetically an extrovert, and I'm unapologetically, are you familiar with DISC profiles? So in Myers-Briggs, I'm an extrovert. In DISC profile, I'm an I, which is influence. I'm kind of an ID, which is driving kind of person. But I am who I am. Listen, I joke around with the city council, you know, when I'm in front of them. And look, I actually don't want to say anything hateful or defamatory because that's not who I am. And there have been times when I've said stuff on Twitter that I regret because that's not the place for it. But I think that Twitter, on balance, has been so much better than a negative. You know, it's been such a positive that it outweighs any negative. I have met people. I'm going to a conference next month at Boston College. I never would have met the Boston College CIO. I would have never met somebody who is the CIO of the American Red Cross or Cancer Society, or, you know what I mean? And so all of a sudden, because I kind of weigh in with my little isms, my staff have always called them isms, right? Because I say things like, you know, as it turns out, go to lunch, fall behind, right? So, and I enjoy thinking, and I enjoy, you know, bon mots and aphorisms, because I find that when there's something that's pithy, I tend to remember it, right? There's probably a diagnosis for that. But on balance, Emma, I find it to be so much more of a positive than a negative because I learn a lot there. I also, and I'll hush after this, but my experience as an Information Week columnist taught me that public thinking is actually sometimes the best thinking. Now, sometimes that's stupid. Don't do that. Don't be talking about your security posture publicly, right? But when I was writing my column and I would write about these goofy things we were getting ready to do, some people would jump in and say, oh my God, we're doing that. It's so great. And then I would be encouraged, and I would have contacts, and I would say, hey, you know, we're we're actually, we actually have somebody over in Chattanooga who did what we did, and we can talk to them and learn not to be burned by the same things that they were burned by. And so that's fantastic. I also think better, right? When you're about to give a presentation, you have to think things through. When you're about to announce something to your 3,000 followers, you don't really want to look like an idiot. So you have to go through a thought process. You have to be a little bit more nuanced. And that's certainly more true for a magazine column than it is for Twitter. Because, a lot of times I'm just going to say stuff like, preach. When someone says, if someone created blockchain, then somebody can do a security attack against blockchain. And my answer to that was preach, But yeah, I think it's a great question, because when you're in public life, you think, oh my God, I can't say anything. But the fact of the matter is, we do live in the US of A, and for the moment, there's still freedom of speech. You still have First Amendment rights, especially speaking on a matter of public concern, right? That doesn't give you a license to be hateful. It doesn't give you a license to be, misogynist or racist. There are some people on Twitter who feel that does, but that's not us, right? So, yeah, great question. On the whole, good though. Yes, sir. Name again?
Patrick.
Patrick.
Yeah. I was curious, does any of your responsibilities bleed over to the Buncombe County, or does Buncombe County have their own mirrored infrastructure? Is there any cross?
No, it's also a great question. Believe it or not, cities have different responsibilities than counties. Or in many cases. For example, counties don't have fire department. Well, they have volunteer. They don't have professional fire departments, right? Counties don't pick up trash. We pick up trash. Our county does not manufacture water. We manufacture water. One of the reasons my job is so interesting, and on good days I say that, on bad days I say something else. One of the reasons my job is so interesting is we have so many lines of business, right? Because public works is very different. One of the ways we do cross over is we do have building safety and they have building safety. We have police, they have sheriff. We have a shared system it's also called CJIS, Criminal Justice Information Systems. We also share what's called a PSAP, a Public Safety Access Point. And so what we do is we pay into that, they manage it, and we manage our officers' gear, their phones, their laptops, their software loads, all that kind of stuff. But the dispatch software and the 911 equipment is managed by the county, at least in this city. And we have interlocal agreements that, specify who's responsible for what and all that kind of stuff.
Does the county have a CIO?
They do. Obviously, I paused there because there's been a lot of shakeup over at the county. But yes, they do. Other thoughts, questions?
Any other questions? Just a second left. The only question I didn't really hear answered, a couple of people asked a question about open records and sharing of that information that I think we touched on, but maybe didn't answer. Does anyone have that question they want to ask?
I can ask mine.
Everybody's ready for Starbucks.
I guess my last question was, were there any major security concerns associated with the automation of open records?
Oh my God, yes.
And what were they?
So I actually did a talk. The FBI has a kind of club of private public folks called InfraGard, and I got invited to the Charlotte chapter of that to talk about that very subject. And you won't hear me say this a lot, but the security concerns around open data is just insane, right? Because these are all open records anyway. And if what you do is is you make it really hard for someone to get to them, then guess who gets to them? Only the bad guys, right? And when we're talking about, and I feel like I should define this, an open record is something that under North Carolina law, a local government must release. Open data is just the automation of that open record. And so way before open data, we had the creepy find out anything about anyone websites, right? Guess how they got it? They got it by asking all the counties for all the public records, which is not data. And here's the problem. Here's why it's worse. It's worse because oftentimes there's data that should not be open, that is included when people are responding to one-off public records requests. I'll give you a great example. Before we automated salary information, guess what was included? Folks who had restraining orders, or protective orders, meaning that there's someone out there who wants to hurt them, and they should not be in any records release. And until we sat down in the room and said, okay, we're going to automate this thing. This is the big one. It's the big one. And it was happening one-offs. You know what I mean? And therefore the law was being broken and people were being put at risk. So when we do open data as a thoughtful, structured process, we avoid that, right? And so we also avoid inadvertent disclosure of PII that should not be. I got a whole presentation on that.
So automating it actually give a more secure.
Yes. Yes, automating it makes you look at it very hard and makes you do the data governance work, which is a lot of work. It's a big lift. But once it's done, every single time when someone does a data pull, consistent, repeatable, reliable. Y'all are wonderful. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I've got some cards here if you want to get in touch. Some of you have already contacted me on LinkedIn. Feel free to do that, or any social media. I'm completely omnivorous. And thank you for having me.
All right, yes, thank you.
Yeah.